Imagine a scenario where your children hardly ever got sick. Imagine a situation where your children would have a predictable level of health in the next 5, 10, even 20 years. We all want that, right, as parents? Absolutely. Well, welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Neil Thompson, and the fact that you're with us tonight on this Facebook Live event on how to improve your child's health means that you're an action taker. And success is always reserved for the action taker. So I want to congratulate you for taking the time out, your busy schedule tonight, to just learn a little bit more about how we can get our kids so much healthier. And I think now of all times we can appreciate the importance of that. Now in the next hour or so, you're going to learn some of the most powerful, effective, natural ways of helping your children get healthy, but more importantly then stay healthy. Just to give you an example, I've got 2 daughters, so yes, I am a dad. And I have got both my girls. I think they've really embraced what the whole wellness and health sort of lifestyle is, and I'm really just so grateful that they have. And I just want to share with you today how you can start to be able to share that with your own kids. Because my eldest daughter Rachel, she's 10 years old, actually, just at the end of the week on Friday. So it's a big event for her. And yes, it is happening on Good Friday. Hence, we are trying to bring a little bit of joy to this Easter week, even if it's during lockdown. And so she's celebrating her 10th birthday on this Friday. And she's never been to the doctor ever. She's never needed to. It's not because we were so mean and we didn't, we just wanted to let her suffer. She just never needed to. And I just want to share with you tonight how we've been able to do that, and just share with you, my wife and I, some of our top tips on how you can get your own kids so much healthier. And it's much the same with my younger daughter as well. She's just turning 7 this year. And it's not by luck. And I think it's important that we recognize that getting truly healthy is really very much about intentional things, key little things that really make a big difference. And I want to be sharing with you tonight what those little things are. So I think without me belaboring that point too much, because I certainly don't want to try and come across as somebody who thinks, oh, we've made it, we're great parents. Believe me, we've made many mistakes, in particular me as dad. My wife is so much better. But I know there are some things that we've done really well. And I know we can impart some, even if it's a little bit of knowledge or a few key tips that will really help you. Now, I've probably attended over 100 different conferences and seminars over the last 20 years, studying the lifestyle strategies of some of the healthiest people on the planet. And I find I always get so much more out of the message when I understand a little bit more about the messenger. So if it's all right, I'm just going to briefly just give a very brief synopsis of how I've ended up coming to speak to you tonight. And then we can get right into the nitty-gritty of how we can get our kids healthier and keep them healthy. All right, so I grew up in Southern Africa. I did my schooling all in what was then an amazing schooling situation where I was brought up in Zimbabwe. I went and studied my undergraduate master's degree in chiropractic in South Africa, in Durban. And for those of you who are wondering why we get the title doctor, it's because it's a master's degree, so it takes 6 years to achieve that. But at the end of that qualification, I think really when I did most of my learning was, in all honesty, in practice. We only learn so much when we are studying. And that's why they call it medical practice or chiropractic practice, because at the end of the day, it's about practice, it's building up experience. And I was given an incredible opportunity once I graduated to go and run a busy practice in the west of Ireland. And so I kind of landed my bum in the butter, and I got exposure to a lot of experience very quickly because it was a busy clinic. I was the only doctor there. And I got to see a lot of families, and I got to see what works and what doesn't work. Within 2 years of being in that practice, we took it from being an average-sized practice to the fastest-growing practice in Southern Ireland. And then I decided I wanted to branch out and start my own practice. So 2 years after arriving in Ireland, I set up my own practice. And within, well, probably 2-3 years, we were seeing over 200 people a week, and mainly families. And the reason why it grew so quickly, though, is because of some of the principles I'm going to be teaching you tonight. Because at the end of the day, it's all about results. During that period of time where I was running my own practice, I had a great opportunity to do a lot of postgraduate programs in the States. So I was regularly flying over to the States. And one of the things I was studying is my postgraduate course in chiropractic biophysics, which is the most researched form of chiropractic there is. In fact, there's more published journal articles supporting chiropractic biophysics technique than all other spinal techniques put together. So we're very much about research here. If it's not backed up with good quality data and research, we don't do it. And I think the fact that I involved in a technique which is very much heavily weighted on research hopefully testifies to that. So for those of you who are wondering, is any of the stuff that I'm going to hear tonight, is it really going to be, based upon what the literature is saying? Is it evidence-based? And absolutely it's going to be. So hopefully that'll allay some of your fears. So during that time, I was also able to study with really probably one of the world's leading experts in wellness, Dr. James Chestnut. So I did also a lot of the postgraduate wellness certification programs with him on Eat Well, Move Well, Think Well. So lifestyle and lifestyle training was huge. And what I really learned about, I can take off these bunny ears now. What I learned about our environment is our environment dictates more about our health than really most other things. In fact, way more so than even our genetic makeup. And you're going to learn a little bit about that tonight as well. So we very much focus on improving our environment so that we can see real change happening in a person's life. And that's based upon what we call epigenetics. It's the study of how your environment literally influences the expression of your genes. And your environment particularly is how we eat, how we move, and how we think. And obviously this is going to be very much influential on our children's health. So trying to teach them how to eat well, move well, and think well is going to be absolutely critical if we want to see the needle moving towards them becoming healthier. And we're going to show you exact strategies on how you can do that. All right, so once I'd finished a lot of those postgraduate programs, I was in Ireland with my wife, because at about that stage I married my wife, who happens to be the sister of my best friend. And yes, I've heard all the jokes before. She very much, though, wanted to be close to family when we started our own family. And so we had no family in Ireland at the time, so we moved over to the Isle of Man because her brother had just moved here. And it really gave us an amazing opportunity to be able to set up a truly family-based wellness practice here. And so Align for Life was born in 2009, at the end of 2009. And since then, we've seen over or close to 5,000 people now. And we've really totally transformed the lives of hundreds of families since then. And it's because of the principles that we're going to be teaching you tonight. So that's kind of really my backdrop or background on how I've come to speak to you tonight. But I want to really get into the nitty-gritty of how we can make this happen as quickly as we can, because we've got quite a lot to cover. So I'm going to try and focus on the things that I tend to get asked the most in practice. So hopefully there'll be stuff that you can implement literally straight away tonight or even tomorrow when you're with the kids. Okay, so let's just kick off. I think it's important to recognize that, whilst I've had a lot of clinical experience, having two girls of my own really catapults you into seeing what works and what doesn't work. And I think we as all parents, we know what it's like when our kids, when they get sick. And thankfully, my kids have hardly got sick at all. In fact, as I said, I could probably count less than 3 fingers the number of times that we've been really concerned about their health. And they always needed just minor interventions to help get them through whatever challenge they were facing at the time. I mean, I think my eldest, the most she's never had any form of medication before, ever. Not even a Calpol, not an antibiotic. I think the most we've given her is probably some cream for athlete's foot, which she picked up with, from swimming. So, what I'm going to be teaching today really does work. And similarly, likewise, for my younger one as well. So, I think what we first got to recognize that, why is there this huge problem at the moment with our kids just not being as well as they should be? I think we can all agree that children today are facing many more health challenges than what we grew up in 20, 30 years ago. And is it because our genes have changed? Our genes haven't changed. In fact, even the most devout evolutionists will agree our genes haven't really changed in 10,000 years. So why is it that so many kids now seem to be having asthma, allergies, immune system problems, or even the fact that 1 in 5 kids in the UK now is considered obese, and this is a real problem, and it's not because of a genetic issue, but it's because of an environmental problem. Our environment, I think we can all agree, has changed radically, really, in the last certainly 50 years, but especially in the last probably 20, 30 years. And when we start to understand really how much our environment literally changes the way our genes express themselves, we're going to start to get a much better idea of really why our environment is so important. And our environment effectively basically can be classed into 4 things: how we eat, how we move, and how we think, and the state of our nervous system. Because our nervous system at the end of the day controls everything. And when we can get these 4 key areas of our life in balance, and we are sufficient and pure in all of them as opposed to deficient and toxic, you'll start to find a situation where our genes are expressing themselves normally. And this is what we call epigenetics. And we know this now because when we mapped out the human genome in 2002, they finished mapping it out. We were expecting to find about 150,000 genes, but we only ended up finding about 25,000. So what we realized is that one gene can express itself in a multitude of different ways depending upon the environment that it's put in. So if it's put in a healthy environment, it'll express itself normally, resulting in normal physiology and health. If it's put in a toxic, deficient, stressed environment, the genes will express themselves abnormally, resulting in abnormal physiology and, if it continues, early death. So we're going to really dive deep into key environmental triggers that are causing a lot of problems. And then we're going to come up with some real solutions that you can implement immediately to try and help your kids get healthy and stay healthy. All right? Okay, so we know we've got a huge problem in the UK at the moment. And it's not because of a lack of drugs or a lack of surgery. I mean, if you think about it, we're not sick because of a lack of medication. We're sick because there are fundamental reasons as to why our bodies, in particular our genes, are now not able to express themselves normally. Even Yale University did a big study only recently showing that lifestyle really contributes towards 75% of longevity. And genetic makeup is at most only contributing about 25%. So when we think, changing our lifestyle is only going to sort of move the needle maybe 5 or 10%, we need to completely throw that thinking out and start to realize it's by far the biggest thing that is going to affect your child's health. The key thing really now is how do I get my children to do the healthy things? And I get that. Some of you are thinking, well, I know this stuff, but how do we get them to do it? Well, hang tight. We'll get there. I think children's health typically is dictated by 2 major things. Number 1, it's dictated by the level of education of the parents, and then number 2 is actually how the parents are modeling that desired behavior. So how much do the parents know, and how well are the parents modeling a healthy lifestyle? I know, it's a big one. You see, kids will focus more on what you do than what you say. And this, I promise this so works. Because thankfully with our kids, we've literally immersed them in healthy lifestyles and healthy living from day one, because my wife and I have basically have set that example. You know, they've seen us how we eat. They see us how we exercise. They see us how we live our lives and how we try and manage stress. And they see the importance of making sure that we have the right sort of positive self-talk and we don't dwell on the negative. So it's very important that as parents, we have to start role modeling to our kids what it is to be truly healthy. Because we don't get sick, we earn sick. We don't get sick, we earn sick. It's by what we're doing all the time, you know. And you know, if you as a parent, you know you're struggling yourself with a lot of health issues, you may definitely get a lot out of this as well, because you're going to learn how to A, role model to your child, but B, how that in turn is also then going to improve your own health. Okay. There's a saying, if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to keep getting what we've always got. And there's a lot of truth to that. What if there's a better way? You know, what if there is a better way of how we do things? And for those of you sitting here tonight watching this and you think, you know what, I'm tired of feeling sick and tired and not feeling energized and having all these health issues, and I'm tired of seeing my child suffer. And it's horrible when we do see our children, you know, struggling. We kind of feel helpless. And tonight's all about empowering you now, so you don't have to feel helpless, so you can really make a difference to the quality of their life. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. You know, sickness and disease affects the quality of their life and yours. And we want to get rid of that. And this is one of the reasons why we're really passionate about getting kids healthy, because what you learn as a child is ultimately the kind of habits that you're going to grow up to as an adult. Hands down. You know, so generally speaking, people who are unhealthy adults tended to be kids that tended to get involved in more unhealthy behaviors. Whereas those kids who have healthy behaviors and healthy habits tend to grow up into adults who tend to be much healthier, because it's very hard to unlearn what we've learned. And especially if we've gone from a good place and we've deteriorated. So yes, we've all experienced that situation where as students, we kind of go off the rails a little bit, but we normally right ourselves quite quickly in our early 20s when we realize, you know what, that's really not working for me. I need to get back to what I know I should be doing, because we've experienced how good we feel when we're doing the right stuff, all right, in terms of how we eat, move, and think. Okay, so tonight's all about showing everyone a better way. We need really first to have a better belief system when it comes to health. You know, a better lens through which to view our own health. And there are really 5 key factors that make up this new lens to which we should view health. And we're going to go through each of them now, because if we don't understand really what health is, we have no chance of actually really achieving it, either for us or for our kids. Okay, so fact number 1. Guess what? You're designed to be healthy. Healthy is normal. Unhealthy is abnormal. You know, and if we simply give our genes what they need and we remove from our bodies what they don't need, our bodies will naturally be healthy. That is our default, our factory setting, so to speak. And some people are thinking, well, what about true genetic problems? And I get that. There are some true genetic problems. But you know what? As research is unraveling, we're beginning to realize that they account for less than 5% of chronic diseases really due to a genetic issue. And now the scientists are even beginning to argue that it could be even less than that. So for the rest of us, 95% of the population, you know, where there are no genetic issues, you know, healthy is normal if we give the body what it needs and we remove what it doesn't need. And you always need to be thinking in terms of toxicity and deficiency. What are we toxic in and what are we deficient in that's ultimately going to drive sickness and disease? in terms of how we eat, move, and think. Number 2, your body is intelligent. So if you think about it, it's really quite amazing when dad's sperm and mom's egg come together, so 2 cells effectively come together, create a fertilized egg, and from there it splits into 2, into 4, into 8, and so on, until we get to about 30 trillion cells, there or thereabouts. And that all happens in about 270 days. So from literally one fertilized egg, we get to a complete human being with all the amazing functions that a human being can do in 270 days. There's been studies showing that your body is so clever that, obviously when you first are just a ball of cells, one of the first things that develops after the nervous system is the heart. And if the cells that ultimately form the heart continue to replicate at the speed at which they do when they're so small, when the embryo is so small, by the time you were born, if that cell division kept going at the same rate as it does within the first probably 5 to 10 weeks, your heart would be the size of an elephant. And it's clearly at some point your body recognizes, okay, I don't need to produce heart cells at that speed anymore. I need to focus on something else. And we've got to start to think about, what is it? What intelligence is it that's creating our body that is ensuring that our whole body is developed so perfectly so that we can breathe, we can pump blood, so we can have normal digestion, so we can actually use all these nutrients in our environment to actually create and build better cells, so we can heal. I mean, isn't it incredible when we go and cut ourselves, 3 weeks later, it's completely healed up. There's maybe at most just a small scar there. We didn't go to how to heal a finger school when we were 1 year old. It was innate. All these things are innately built within us. We don't have to think about any of it. It just happens automatically, and it's really the mystery of life. And what you've also got to think about is, that same intelligence that literally took you from 2 cells to 30 trillion cells and doing all the amazing things you can do now, that same intelligence is with you right now, whether you're 2 years old, 10 years old, even 80 years old. That intelligence hasn't gone, it's still there. But sometimes it's not able to express itself fully. And this is where we come in and where we can help. So that intelligence effectively is expressed through the nervous system. All intelligence courses across the nervous system. And so the state of our nervous systems is critical to us being healthy and well. If our nervous systems have interferences and are not firing the way they should be, and our nervous system, think about it, really is electricity. So if our nervous systems are not firing the way they need to, this is going to have all sorts of problems with every aspect of our bodies. If you think about it, how much of our life is dependent upon a healthy nervous system? If it controls breathing, hormonal production, pulse, blood pressure, healing, it controls absolutely everything. So the state of our nervous system is key. And our spine essentially is the suit of armor that protects the nervous system. So if the spine is all out of alignment and your posture is all out of whack, this is going to start to now put stresses on that nervous system. The spine is that suit of armor that literally encases the nervous system. So you've got to think of our nervous system ultimately as our brain, and then the spinal cord, which is really just an extension of the brain, extends out from that, and that's encased in the vertebral bodies. So we know how important the nervous system is because that's why we have literally bone surrounding our brain, because we know if we suffer damage to the brain, it's going to have a huge impact. And likewise, our spinal cord as well also has to be protected. But here's the thing, our spinal cord has to be flexible. So there's this challenge that the body has is, on the one hand, it's got to protect the nervous system, but on the other hand, we need to be able to move. We can't just be rigid like this. So the spine needs to be able to protect the nervous system well and be able to move. And so we can run and jump and do all the fun things that we can actually do and live life. And so the state of that spine is absolutely key if we want to then be healthy as well. And if you think about it, when babies get checked, even at the prenatal, when they're just born, so it'll be postnatal first visit with the pediatrician, most of the emphasis is really focusing in on, looking at the heart, the lungs, hearing, and all those kind of things, which obviously are really important, but very little focus is placed on the spine and whether any damage or trauma or even interference was created in the spine during the birthing process, which for most people is probably one of the most traumatic events that a person will ever go through, unless they've had a really bad car accident. This is what happens when you talk too much. So, a lot of the times, many of us are growing up with spine problems that even potentially could have developed right from the birthing process, or maybe from an early fall that we had when we were first learning how to walk or crawl, and we fell down the stairs. I mean, goodness me, both my kids fell down the stairs. Were we irresponsible parents? No, I didn't think so. But, kids seem to manage to find any possible way to get to the most dangerous place and do the wrong things there. And I think we've all experienced that. Even the best well-meaning parents are still going to have situations where kids just do crazy things. They roll off the baby changer and they land on their head. There's situations where often, we could be in a car and we've had a car accident, and unfortunately the kid has been in the baby carrier, and yes, thankfully they were in the car seat, but it still would have had an impact to the spine. In fact, I think the latest research now says that by the time the average child is 7 years old, they've had about 1,500 falls of some degree as they learn how to walk, run, etc. And this is life. I mean, you've seen your kids. They walk and bang into tables when they were learning how to walk, or when they even were just running around the house and they just run into the door because they weren't looking, because they were looking somewhere else. I mean, the number of times my kids have done that, and we've had to pick up the pieces and obviously check their spines as well. Thankfully, Dad is a chiropractor, so he can do that. But most parents don't have that luxury. And so, these kids just start to build up over time all these traumas in the spine, which can start to accumulate and compound. And it can start to eventually affect the nervous system. So, is it any wonder then why so many kids are struggling then with whether it be sleep problems, immune system problems, allergy problems, to constant coughs and colds, to, often many of them are just not meeting their milestones. And it's because the environment that we're in now is constantly assaulting their nervous systems. And it's not obviously just from a physical point of view. I mean, dietary-wise as well. And we're going to go into some of this now as we break it down. So the bottom line is natural development, it matters. How our parents were, what our mum's health and physiological state was like pre-birth. In fact, even preconception. So we can even go back to what was her nutritional status before she even conceived. Will actually determine how strong constitutionally that child's health will be. There was a great study done in India not long ago how they showed that the health of the mum prior to even falling pregnant had a direct impact on the chance of that child being healthy or not, because it ultimately determined the constitutional health of that child. Because if a child is trying to develop in a mum that is not healthy, that child is always going to be worse off than if the mum is healthy. Because of the fact that, if they're not sufficient nutrients, vitamins, minerals, trace elements, okay, as well as also positive hormones, all these things will have an impact. Then obviously pregnancy itself obviously is fundamental. Many women who've gone through quite traumatic events while they were pregnant can often end up developing their children can end up taking on some of that stress that they experienced in their mom's womb. Because what happens in biology is your body will adapt to the environment that it's in. So if the developing baby is developing in a mum who's going through a lot of stress, that child is being prepared to enter a stressful world. And so the physiology of the child will start to move towards an adaptive stress response. And unfortunately, that is where you don't tend to get thriving, growth, healing, and repair anywhere near the optimal levels. And in many cases, it can be really stunted. So what is the mom going through emotionally when she's pregnant? Physically, what is she going through? In terms of, is she very sedentary? Is she exercising? What is her diet like? Her diet is directly going to influence the quality of nutrition that her baby is going to be receiving as well. So these things are all key. And then we can talk about the birthing process itself. What we now understand about the birthing process is, in a normal vaginal delivery, as a baby is born, it gets all the vaginal good flora from the mum, and we understand flora meaning all those good bacteria, and we understand now from all the studies now done on the microbiome, which is the study of how all our good bacteria influence our immune system and our health. When we as babies are being exposed to these good bacteria as we go through a normal vaginal birth, and it's literally smeared all over us, the first bacteria we're exposed to is from our mum. And if those are good quality bacteria, if she's in a healthy state, we're going to pick up those good quality bacteria from day one. And most of our immune system, we now recognize, actually stems through from the state of our microbiome, the state of our natural flora in our gut. And it comes through, firstly, from the vaginal process. It gets into our mouth, in our nose, and into the gastrointestinal tract and into our guts. And it's pretty much there then for the rest of our life. It sets the scene for your natural microbiome for the rest of your life. So much so now that we are strongly recommending mums who haven't been able to give birth vaginally that at the very least they should get their kids onto a probiotic as soon as possible. But also there's even now studies showing that even if they can take a swab from the vagina of the mum and smear it all over the child, the newborn child, even though there was no vaginal birth, that can definitely be of benefit, even if it was a C-section. Breastfeeding, another key stage in our life, because when we as children are breastfed from our mums, a couple of things happen here. Firstly, it's an incredibly bonding experience. Now, I say as a man, I will never fully understand this, okay? But I could watch my wife and our daughters when she breastfed them. And she breastfed them for, Rachel was almost 2 years, or 18 months. And Abby, I think, it was at least a year, and I think it was closer to 14 months. So at least a year they were being breastfed. And there's a real bonding experience that happens there. And even as a man, you can see that happening with your child and their mum. And not only is it emotionally bonding for the child, but certainly obviously for the mum as well, which then produces oxytocin, okay, feel-good hormones in her, which then now enters the breast milk, which then gets into the child. So these are the kind of things that we're just not going to find in formula. There's just no ways the best companies in the world can create a formula that's as good as what a mum can produce in terms of their milk. And also, obviously, if the mum is healthy and has been eating well, the quality of that breast milk is going to be very, very good as well. And it's going to have all the natural immunity in that milk as well. You know, the antibodies and things that child needs to be able to start life with the best head start and not fall victim to every viral or bacterial infection that they're going to be exposed to, because they're getting all of that immunity directly from mom and from mom's milk. Toxin exposure, you know, this can include both vaccines and antibiotics. You know, these things are going to have an impact. They just will. because there just are chemicals and things in those things that will start to create toxic buildup. But also, when we enter the stage of teething, just want to make a note here. Right, even when they get to the teething stage and kids are, struggling with the teeth coming through and the gums are raw, trying to ensure that they are. I remember we got our kids to chew on any rubber toys we could find, and we just used our fingers to rub their gums, which will just actually help stimulate the teeth to try and come through, and also that mechanical action also inhibits some of the discomfort that they're under. So getting them to chew on stuff is much better than just giving them loads of Calpol, which is really just an anti-inflammatory, which is just going to be designed to suppress the pain and inflammation. But that over time starts to have an effect on the liver of the child. And again, it's just a further toxin that the child is then going to be exposed to. And when you use these other methods of trying to just ease their discomfort, because obviously you don't want the children suffering, they really do work. And that's again why that emotional bond between mom and child is so key, because and that is really established very well. If obviously she's been breastfeeding the child and she's now able to also use these other techniques where she can start to rub the gums and also be able to get these. I remember we had a sort of a rubber ring that we used for our kids, and they used to love chewing on this all the time. And it really stimulates the gums well, as opposed to just trying to numb the children's pain and discomfort with painkillers and Calpol. One of the problems with having a situation where also in the modern world we have today, kids are very much being protected from anything that is possibly unhygienic. We have this sort of tendency in the Western world to sanitize everything, and what it means is that kids are just not getting exposed to the normal bacteria and viruses and fungi and mold, etc., that they normally would in real nature, in real life. And so what happens is the developing immune system of the child isn't able to develop properly. You've got to think about when we're born, our immune system is this incredible complex piece of hardware and software, but it can only start to operate when it starts to get some data inputted into it. And if we're not getting any data inputted into the immune system because everything is literally being sterilized, we're not being exposed to any bacteria, viruses because of all these interventions, especially with the overuse of antibiotics, etc., and then these ultra sanitary conditions where we just never let them play in the dirt, etc., kids are just not going to be exposed to these viruses and bacteria, etc., which would normally start to prime and train the immune system. This is huge, because when the immune system isn't being primed and trained, if it's not being exposed to this stuff, what happens is it's a trade-off. We trade essentially acute short-term illnesses for long-term chronic lifelong problems like allergies, asthma, and even we now understand that there is an increased risk of cancer because of an immune system that hasn't actually been primed from a young age. Because at the end of the day, cancer develops because there's a problem within our immune system. Our immune system is not recognizing cells that have become cancerous, and they're not killing them and destroying them, because our immune systems haven't been primed and trained properly from when we were babies and kids. And so this is why you can get into an airplane now where, well, not now, but obviously when COVID eventually lifts, we can get into an airplane where you can't even open a bag of peanuts because someone's going to have an anaphylactic shock. Because what happens is when our bodies are not exposed to these bacteria and viruses at all, when they then eventually do come into contact with quite inert things like pollen, dust, certain foods, etc., they overreact. The immune system has been doing nothing, and the software is not being uploaded to a degree where it can actually now recognize, no, that is actually harmless, but this actually is dangerous. It attacks that. It just attacks everything because it hasn't been exposed to enough things to attack in the past. And so it ends up becoming overreactive. And this is why we're getting an epidemic of atopic conditions like allergies, hay fever, asthma, etc. All right, and it's really starting because of what we as kids are being exposed to, when right from the time we're born. If we're not being exposed to these bacteria and viruses, we are only going to get into problems later on down the road. So ultra sanitary conditions, let the kids just play in the dirt. There's a time and a place for that. And I think we can all agree, those of us who are sort of into their 40s or 50s, that's what most of us did when we were kids. And we didn't have these problems. And this is why. We now understand this is why. Okay, so what's happening instead is we have a situation where many children now are being born into a world which is completely unnatural. Number one, often they're born via C-section. And yes, there's a time and a place for a C-section. But unless there's a real emergency, they should be really kept as a last resort because it does change key developmental opportunities for the child to be exposed to the vaginal bacteria and flora, for example. C-sections also, believe it or not, are normally more traumatic to the baby's neck than a vaginal birth because the obstetrician has to get in, pull, twist the baby out. The baby is normally geared down towards head down, unless obviously it's breech. But even then, when they make an incision in a C-section, they don't just make a huge hole and then just lift the baby out, which a lot of people still naively think. They make as small a hole as possible, obviously, because they're cutting through key muscles. So they're going to have to get their hands in there, bend, twist, and pull. And it's much more traumatic normally on the baby's neck than obviously in a normal vaginal birth, which is the way we've been created to give birth. As I said, there's a time and a place for it, but it should only be used as a last resort. Only 10% of pregnancies are really complicated and might need the use of that. But in places like even South Africa, for example, I think it's up to certainly more than 50% of kids now are being born C-section just because it's convenient for the obstetrician and the midwives and the nursing staff. And also, there's this a situation where some mums just haven't really understood the importance of actually a normal vaginal birth and what that can mean for their child going forward. Later studies reckon that up to a normal vaginal birth, up to 20 pounds of stress can be applied to the head and neck of a baby. But as soon as you add forceps, suction, or C-section, up to 50 to 100 pounds of stress can be applied to the head and neck of that baby. So chances are, if you're someone who's had a C-section because you had to, definitely you want to maybe get your kids checked to see if there's been any trauma to the spine and nervous systems that could have developed as a result. And often it could just be because the baby's very colicky. It could be that they're not hitting their milestones. They've got developmental problems in how to crawl or how to walk or speech delay. There's so many different things that can be affected, which might not be affected straight away. And this is the problem, is, when we have a trauma there to that spine, it can leave a permanent imprint or mark on the nervous system and might only really sort of show itself more evidently, sometimes a year, 2, 3, even 5, 10 years later, right? Maybe it might only develop as migraines in an adolescent. And it could have been because of trauma at the birth. Okay, so this is very important to understand. Okay, so when we also then, I don't know if people are aware of the fact that antibiotic usage now in kids, most kids by the time they're 2 years old, have already had, or 2/3 should I say, have already had some form of course of antibiotics. And in many places, by the time a person is 18 years old, they've had up to 17 courses of antibiotics. Now, this is a problem because we're destroying all bacteria when we take an antibiotic. It doesn't just selectively pick the bad ones. It kills all the good ones. And we're more good bacteria than we are bad. So when we take these antibiotics, unless it's for a life-threatening situation, they should be used as an absolute last resort because it's really destroying and wreaking havoc with the microbiome. And most kids, as I said, by the time they're 2, have at least had one course of antibiotics, and most of them have had at least one course per year, and many of them have even had more, especially if they've had recurrent ear infections, recurrent tonsillitis problems. Those, I would say, are probably the most common 2 things that will often cause kids to be given antibiotics on a regular basis. Well, just because they're constantly sickly, and an antibiotic is given. And we know the problems with that. A, it causes antibiotic resistance, and B, it destroys the good bacteria. Now, when we destroy the good bacteria, it means we crash the immune system of that child. And the irony is, while trying to kill those bad bacteria, we're actually rendering the immune system long-term even weaker. And so the child is even more susceptible to getting sick down the road. There's also now just studies just being published in the NHS showing that children who have had regular antibiotics are much more likely to become obese as they get older, and because of how it affects the whole physiology and homeostasis of the body. And we know now in the UK, 1 in 5 kids is already obese. And one of the big culprits of that is because of the use of antibiotics. All right, so as a child moves beyond the sort of baby toddler years and they're into the school years, these are some of the things that they tend to get exposed to, which we need to be aware of. And what we call the 5 vital factors that affect immune function during the school year. Number 1, it's going to be diet. I mean, this is going to be huge. What kids are being fed now in typical school dinners, it's great, actually. Thankfully, the Isle of Man, they do certainly try to provide some fresh produce and things. But, I mean, I've asked my kids, and I said, guys, how many kids are actually eating, the fruit and the vegetables? And it's just not happening. And they regularly come home and tell me about, how much, pizzas, burgers, chips, donuts, all that kind of stuff was eaten, and how no one touched the salad or the fruit, etc. And it just gets scraped into the bin, and they're just horrified at how much wasted fresh produce there is. And the problem is this is meaning that the cells that these kids are developing they're trying to produce cells that are effectively being fueled by toxic and deficient food. No wonder the quality of the cells is going to be suboptimal. So getting a healthy diet is absolutely key. And a lot of parents say, well, how on earth do we do that? Because, we can't control what they eat either at school or what they eat when they go to friends' houses or parties. Focus on when they are at home. Make sure that when they are at home, get them to eat healthy stuff at home. You don't really have a lot of control when they're at their friend's house. And when it comes to school, start doing more packed lunches. Just the reality is the budget's not going to be there for the government to try and actually be able to give all these kids, ideally 6 to 8 or 6 to 9 servings of fruit and veg per day. And that's really what kids really need to be looking to aim towards eating. And obviously a big chunk of that is going to be from their school lunch. So we should have a situation where our kids' lunches are ideally made the night before or the morning of a lunch pack full of fruits and vegetables, crudités, some hummus sticks, some hummus so that they can use their crudité sticks to, whether it be a stick of broccoli or a stick of carrot and a stick of cucumber. And I know some of you are thinking, there's no ways my kid's going to ever eat a crudité of broccoli or cucumber. You'd be surprised what can happen. you've got to just find what they like eating and give them a lot of that. And when I mean what they like eating, I mean find whatever it is that is good for them. And even if it's just grapes, make sure then they're getting a lot of grapes. Make sure it's something raw and fresh. But try and experiment with lots of different fruits and veg. The problem is we often have vegetables that are completely overcooked, soggy, they've lost their color. No wonder the kids don't like that. I mean, I hated that too. Whereas if it's bright and colorful, it's crunchy, you've got a nice dip, whether it be mashed up avo, guacamole, or some hummus, that's what makes it now more interesting for them. And if you're role modeling that as a parent and they see you eating that all the time, I promise kids will start to do it, especially if you train them from a young age. So the earlier you can catch them and the quicker you can condition them from a younger age, the better. So diet's a big one. Normally, one of the second big challenge for kids and their immune systems and just general health is they're not sleeping enough. So just to give you an idea, kids between the ages of 3 and 6 should be sleeping really between 10 to 13 hours a day, including naps. Kids between the ages of 6 and 12 should be sleeping between 9 and 12 hours a day, including naps. Kids from the ages of 13 to 18, normally between 8 and 10 hours a day. And if our kids are not getting good quality sleep, that is when most of the healing and repairing happens. And especially if they're looking at devices and things before they go to bed. So absolutely no devices before they go to bed, at least an hour. So TV, video games, they're one of the worst because a lot of the video games are very stimulating, often action-packed or violent, just the fact that they're looking at a blue screen, all that blue light that is emitted from electronic screens inhibits melatonin production, which enables a person to fall into a deep sleep. So we want to be looking at screens we only want to be looking at screens during the day, really, and minimizing them at night, and definitely not an hour before bed, okay? And for kids, there's absolutely no reason why they should be on their screens an hour before bedtime. It should be quality family time, playing games, and or reading stories, etc. There's no need for devices. Those devices are wreaking havoc with kids. So I strongly recommend getting them off those. Look at also at when they are using a device, many of them are just sitting there hunched over. So during the day I'm talking about now. I get it. Kids need to be sometimes on a computer or on a laptop or iPad, etc. Because a lot of homework now, especially with all this online learning, so much of it now is on that. So try and get them to align their tummies more and they're looking up. And that also helps take stress off the neck as well, because tech neck is becoming a big problem with our kids and our kids' generation. They're constantly looking at their phones down like this, and it's putting huge strain on their necks. And this over time starts to create problems to that spine and the nervous system. And then remember, as the spine is stressed, the nervous system is going to be stressed as well, and that's when problems can kick off as well. Headaches is probably one of the most common ones because of that. There's even a term now called cognitive dementia. Let's just have a look here. I'll just try and find it. Can't find it there now, yeah. Yeah, anyway, it's a form of dementia that is starting to develop in children because of too much exposure to computer screens. And it literally is actually causing parts of the brain to not function and develop the way they should do. So we need to really limit the amount of hours and time kids are on screen time. Okay. A couple of other things where kids are going to normally be lacking in, and which is starting to cause problems. Their posture, linked not just with looking at phones and things, but their backpacks. This is a big one, all right? Also, lack of vitamin D because of just not being outside enough, especially in the northern hemisphere in high latitudes where often either it's cold or the weather's not great, just like here obviously in the Isle of Man. Most kids are vitamin D3 deficient, which is has a huge impact on our immune systems. In fact, there's studies now showing that people who are on a vitamin D3 adequate amounts, so between 4,000 and 6,000 international units, people who are on adequate amounts of vitamin D3 have substantially less chance of developing colds and flu. And even just with regards to the whole coronavirus at the moment, there's studies now showing that it'll protect you against it'll give you 93% protection against any complications linked with COVID. That's just from taking vitamin D3. And unfortunately, most of the Western world now is completely vitamin D3 deficient because we're in our offices or schools all day long. We're not getting outside. So even if it is nice and sunny outside, we're in an indoors lifestyle culture now because everything now is based upon, technology and indoor life. And this obviously is having an impact long term on our health because most people are now vitamin D3 deficient. Okay, and then another one that people are tending to find is becoming a problem is fish oil. Fish oil contains omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids, most kids are deficient in them. And as a result, because of this deficiency in omega-3 fatty acids, think of omega-3 fatty acids as brain food. So our brains are just not getting adequate amounts of omega-3s that they need, A, to develop, but also to be able to function as optimally as they should. So your brain and nervous system essentially is fat, and omega-3 fatty acids is normally the most limiting raw ingredient for our nervous systems to be able to function optimally. So we must be thinking about supplementing our diets with omega-3 fatty acids, simply because we can't eat fish every day now because it's so toxic with mercury. So we need to take a omega-3 supplement that's had the mercury removed. All right, so that's also something that obviously parents need to start thinking about, is start supplementing with not just probiotics and not just vitamin D, but also fish oil as well. And also thinking about maybe taking a multivitamin, okay? So there's so many multivitamins that are available. You want really to have a multivitamin that's made from whole foods, preferably, not just the synthetics. This is all available here at Alliance for Life. So if you're at a short end, definitely come here. One of our team will help you out with that. Okay, so that's a probiotic, vitamin D3, omega-3s, and multivitamin. Those are the absolute 4 key supplements all kids really should be on, just like you. And our kids have been on these supplements virtually from day one because there are liquid forms and things that you can use for kids. And even now, they're at a stage when you train them well, they actually happily take down the capsules and have been doing so for years. Other things that you can do to help, you want to try and minimize sugar. In fact, rule it out altogether if you can, except when there's obviously special occasions and birthday functions, etc. like that. You want to minimize sugar as much as possible. Sugar will crash kids' immune systems. It makes them hyper as well. And it is the fuel for most chronic illness, okay, including cancers, etc. So we've got to really start minimizing sugar. Watch those labels, okay? Try and make stuff from scratch. Make meals and things from scratch. Don't just buy ready-made meals because so many of them have got so much added sugar to them. And I think you guys know that. So home-cooked dinners are always best. Pack their lunches rather. And often packed lunches can be just from leftovers from their healthy meal from the night before. And also make breakfast a priority. So, instead of just a whole bowl of cereal, coconut, Cocoa Pops or, Frosties, whatever it is, we want to try and get kids starting to eat much more fruit, okay? Maybe a muesli, oats, much, much better. All right. some morning strategies that you can start to implement as well, which will be really helpful. So I'll never forget, someone said, if you want, I'm going to try to remember how it goes now. If you want a successful life, you need to take each day as it comes, which starts with really making sure that you have a great start in the morning. So as your morning goes, so your day tends to follow. If you're having a really good, well-structured, great start in the morning, you're more likely to set yourself up for a much more productive, better quality day. If our mornings are harassed, stressed, we're on the back foot, we're in hindbrain mode, we're reactive, we're rushing around, we're not getting time to having a good breakfast, we send the kids off to school stressed because we're running late, this all just fires in stress hormones, stress response. Is it any wonder then that we get into the classroom or the workplace and we're not feeling so good? So make sure you start each day with a really good quality start in the morning. So make sure you get up so that there's enough time to get everything ready with the kids. It's not just a mad rush. A good way to start the morning is either with a smoothie, okay, or the power breakfast like with oats and fruit. Smoothies are particularly good for picky eaters. So I know there's a lot of kids out there who just feel, no, I'm not going to eat that, I'm not going to eat that, I'm not going to eat that. And the smoothie is a great way to get in some really good stuff that they normally wouldn't eat, but you can hide it in the smoothie. And you can, add in a little bit of raspberries or beetroot, which funny enough doesn't taste horrible, but makes it bright red. And you'll be amazed at how maybe they are more likely to slug it down. You want to always be thinking in terms of where's the plant, where's the protein, and where's the fat with all their meals. Okay, so minimal amount of their energy supply should be coming from refined carbohydrates, bread, pasta, potatoes, etc. Most of our carbohydrates should actually really be coming from the carbohydrates of plants. So we should always be thinking about, when preparing meals for our kids, where's the plants, where's the protein, where's the fat? Because there's good fat. We need good fat. Okay, things like avocados are really good example of fat. Nuts are really good examples of good quality fat. And obviously, you're going to have to be aware of any allergies there, though. So those are some just key tips that you can use. Macadamia nuts are particularly good. Almond nuts are particularly good. All right. You can even use some of the nut butters as well, which is a really good way of trying to get in some good quality protein and fats. Make sure you get the kids moving also before school. It's great during the summer to try and even get kids to walk to school, which is a really good way of getting them moving, or even getting them doing some fun stretching exercises in the morning, or just just have a wrestling match on the floor with the kids. I often wrestle with my kids, and it's a great way to get them moving, get them get their heart rate pumping up. Them having to push me around 75 kgs worth, and it gets them going, it gets them exercising. Get them on a trampoline, get them jumping around on a mattress, okay, on the floor. Anything that gets movement there, but make it fun. Because movement is critical for brain performance. If the brain is not receiving a lot of movement stimulus from the body, the brain literally actually starts to shut down. So the better the spine moves, the better the brain works. In particular, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which controls learning and memory. So the better the spine moves, the better learning and memory is, the better learning is likely to be. The more sedentary a child and the less the spine moves, this part of the brain literally goes flat, just like a battery. And so obviously we shouldn't be thinking why our children are not performing well at school, or they're not able to concentrate, if they're just not able to get in movement first thing in the morning, because their brains literally just start to go flat, just like a battery. So try get them moving as much as possible, before and after school. All right, not just before. Always try and leave them laughing. Slow down. The 2-minute rule. Focus the most intention on what you say. The first thing that the first time you see them in the morning, so when they just wake up, and just before they go off to school. So the first minute after they're woken up, and then the last minute just before they go to school, those are the two things that you really need to be very intentional about to make sure that they are going into school on a positive note. Okay, right, let me just find my place here. Right, sleep. This is another big one as well. We talked a little bit about this already. All I want to add in with this is the best time for sleep is between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. That is the money time. All right. So if kids are going to bed after 10 o'clock, you're already eating away into some of the most key hours for them to grow and develop and heal. Make sure they're getting to bed definitely way before 10 o'clock. All right. 9 o'clock really, to be honest, should be the latest they are going to sleep. When we're talking about emotional stress at school, and obviously this is going to be particularly more relevant as they become teenagers. You know, kids are being faced with a lot of stress these days, and it's not just with, you know, friends and teachers and peer pressure, etc., and the stress of performing in sports, their parents, their grades, you know, just their busy schedules. I mean, I think we can all recognize that kids' schedules now are really jam-packed with activities and popularity, but obviously with that comes with the whole social media thing. And I think we can all agree that social media, you know, it's been a double-edged sword. And unfortunately, we're beginning to see the serious problems of what some of the social media can end up doing to our kids' mental health. We've got to just be very careful on what kind of things they are constantly being exposed to, especially on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, etc., TikTok, etc. So, you know, even just with Facebook, make sure that they are in a situation where they are, whilst they might be friends with certain people, they can unfollow friends that are constantly producing negative material. So you want their news feed to be a news feed that is positive and uplifting, and it's not full of whinging or whining or complaining or negative information. And there's so much misinformation out there as well on Facebook as well. So, you know, just try and have a look at what your kids are, what sort of companies or online programs that they're following and liking, and anything that is negative, you definitely want to try and keep them away from that. They can unlike that, and if it's just a friend though that they don't want to unfriend, but they don't want to be following and listening to their ranting, you know, they can just unfollow the friend without actually defriending the person. So it just means that their news feed is not going to be filled with negativity. Obviously, we know there's a huge amount of pressure now on kids to be behaving and looking a certain way, and it's pressures that we never experienced when we were growing up. So all I'm going to say with regards to the social media part of things is that, you know, at the end of the day, I think kids are going to get most of their emotional support, or should be getting most of their emotional support, from their immediate family, and in real-time relationships. You know, online relationships are great, but they shouldn't be a replacement for real life interactions with people, because there's only so much that technology can provide in terms of emotion, you know, connection, even just physical touch, and we can't get that from online. So you really want to be trying to encourage your kids to actually get involved, actually physically interact with other kids. And I appreciate now it's a really difficult time because of COVID, and this is why we're seeing mental health problems skyrocket. And it's not just in adults, in kids like we've never seen before. You know, we now reckon that in the UK, 1 in 8 kids is suffering a mental disorder. 1 in 8. And this is a huge problem, and the prescribing of antidepressants is going through the roof. And one of the best things you can try and do to try and prevent your child going down that route is minimize the amount of Facebook online exposure, especially to things that are negative, and make sure that any exposure they are getting from social media is positive, uplifting. And it's never a replacement for real interactions. And it's again going to be modeled by us as parents. If we're constantly on social media, don't be surprised in our kids when our kids are constantly wanting to be on it as well. Okay, so what we model is what they're going to pick up. I think one of the important things, I just want to touch on why exercise in particular is so important, is not only is it a great way to stimulate this part of the brain, which obviously helps our learning and development, but it eliminates waste and toxins. It gets the lymphatic system going, which essentially is like your filter system for your immune system. And without movement, your lymphatic system can't pump and function and flow the way it needs to. And so we're going to be much more susceptible to colds and flu and viral infections and just general infectious disease problems if we're not exercising regularly. It also reduces stress hormone production when we exercise, so kids will feel literally less stressed. And it's going to just help with them being more positive and lift their mood. And this is obviously really, really important. You know, and again, it's why technology is such a problem, because it does the complete opposite. Disease, remember, always harbors in stagnant tissues. Disease harbors in stagnant tissues. So let's get moving, and not just our kids. We should role model with them as well. Just a note about backpacks. We talked a little bit about how that can affect a child's posture. And yes, you know, we've probably been staggered at how heavy some of these kids' backpacks are. And so what we really need to do with backpacks is, firstly, they should have a double strap. You never want a one strap situation where they sling it over one shoulder. It should be a double strap, and even better if they've got a belt strap as well. It takes a lot of pressure off the shoulders and puts it on the hips. And you want most of the heavy parts of the heaviest contents of the backpack in the lower back, sitting on the lower part of the pelvis, right at the bottom of the backpack. And you want to make sure that the straps are tightened up tightly so that as much of the weight as possible is being put on the lower back and the hips, not on the shoulders. As a general rule, no more than 10 to 15% of the child's body weight, all right, should be in the backpacks. Now, I don't know, when I was a kid, I remember I stuffed my bag full of all the books I needed for the entire month, and I never unpacked it. And then no wonder I was carrying around a ridiculous amount of weight. So make sure you regularly, each week, empty the child's backpack. Make sure there's no rubbish collecting in there, and every day you should repack it so that only the important stuff for that day is in it. Otherwise, they are going to be carrying unnecessary load on their developing spines, which again can cause real problems, because as the spine starts to slowly shift out of its normal alignment, that's going to now start to put pressure on the spinal cord and nervous system and create a lot of problems potentially for that child. Not just in terms of back pain and neck pain, but what's common is as the spine shifts out of alignment, it's going to stress the nervous system in all sorts of different ways, which can cause all sorts of health problems as well. So it's not just about back pain and neck pain. In fact, most kids, you will find that pain is normally a very late symptom. They've often developed a lot of other issues way before they get pain, whether it be ear infections, or whether they're getting headaches, or whether they're getting digestive system problems, right? Or they maybe have got bedwetting at night. These are common things that can be being caused by problems in the spine. So, and they might not have any back pain at all or any neck pain, yet they got these kind of problems on a regular basis. So that's why trying to minimize stresses and loads to the spine that could cause these misalignment problems to develop is very important. Right, we talked about tech neck as well, okay? There's a whole campaign at the moment going on in North America. It's called Look Up America. So we can apply it to the UK as well. Everyone is just looking down at their technology, at their screens or phones. So we want to make sure you're getting kids to regularly look up if they are in the middle of an online class, etc., and they're having to use a computer. Get them to look up regularly. You know, get them lying on the floor, looking up as well if they're on an iPad or something as well. Just so you know, these kind of tech neck problems don't just cause neck problems and headaches, but they can also cause a lot of developmental disorders and more. So again, one of the more common things is recurrent tonsillitis. Okay, you'd be amazed at how many kids have recurrent tonsillitis because there's potentially problems in the mid to lower neck area where the nerves have an impact, and particularly on the throat area. Also it can even affect things like power into the arms and hands, okay, coordination issues, right? So if the child's just not as coordinated as they could be, it can be coming from a problem in the spine as well. So yeah, don't just think of neck pain and headaches. A really good trick to teach them when they are spending a lot of time, because they have to, doing homework or doing some form of online classes, getting them to do what we call the Ywlt exercises. So you make a big Y, point the thumbs backward, pull the shoulder blades back. Okay, and you're going to try and just keep the shoulders back, so you're retracting the rhomboid muscles at the back, the muscles between your shoulder blades. You're pulling them back, keeping the head back. You're going to hold for 15 seconds. Okay, and then you're going to drop down to a W, hold for 15 seconds. Then drop down to a T, again hold for 15 seconds, and then drop down to an L, hold for 15 seconds as well. You can struggle to remember, just think you will love these. You will love these. So I just rearranged the last order so you can remember. And it's a brilliant way of getting rid of that hunched over posture, that sort of T-Rex position that all of us find ourselves in when we are at the computer too. And literally just 2 or 3 times a day when they've been at the computer for a while is a great way to counteract some of that. Looking at their posture, start to look at your child's posture. When you look at them from the front, is one ear lower than the other one? Are you seeing a situation where the head, the middle of the head, is not in the middle of the chest? Maybe you're seeing something like that, okay? Or maybe you're seeing one ear is more prominent than the other ear because the head is turned, all right? Maybe you're seeing one shoulder dropped, okay? These are all indications that there are problems in the spine that are developing and they should be being checked out because they are going to cause asymmetrical forces and pressures, not just on the muscles and joints, but also remember on the nervous system. And remember, what does the nervous system control? Everything. How much of our life is dependent upon a healthy nervous system? All of it. So postural abnormalities are normally the earliest indications of spine nervous system problems. Another common one you should be looking for is even when you're looking at their rib cage, are you seeing a situation where there's maybe a bigger gap on one side of the body compared to the other? All right. Okay. Or again, are you seeing one shoulder or hand hanging in front of the other as well? Could be a sign of rotation. Okay. When you're looking at the spine from the side, a straight line should pass through the ear, shoulder, hip, knee, and ankle. And most people are in a situation where they're like this. Okay, because they're at a computer all day long, and then they're wondering why they've got so many neck pain, back pain, headache problems. But again, in kids, they won't necessarily present with these kind of pain problems. They're going to say, Mom, why is it that I don't have any energy, right? Or why am I struggling to focus or concentrate? Or why are their grades deteriorating? Or maybe it could be even something as like, why am I constantly having, feel like I've got gas and I'm wanting to burp all the time? Because as this part of the mid-back, as it starts to become more misaligned, it's going to affect the nerves that go supply things like the stomach and duodenum. Okay, and it can affect the digestion. Or a child might start developing things like enuresis, which basically means bedwetting. Okay, this is a common thing as well. So don't just think pain. There's a lot of other issues that could be developing as well without any pain. So these are the most common reasons children visit our office. Ear infections, asthma, constipation, bedwetting, headaches, leg cramps. Some people, it's because they're struggling with a lot of allergies and skin conditions, or it's just because they want to stay well. They just want to keep their kids well for as long as possible. So remember, the body is self-healing. It's a self-healing and self-regulating organism. And the nervous system is the master controller of all of this. It controls all regulation, all homeostasis is basically balance and harmony, all physiological functions in your body. And it controls, obviously, all repair. And your spine is the suit of armor that protects the nervous system. And so when the spine is no longer moving properly and is misaligned, which is what we call a subluxation, this is what now can start to cause problems to the nervous system. And chiropractors simply work on trying to remove these subluxations from the spine and nervous system so that the brain-body can communicate properly again. Remember, your nervous system is electricity. It's producing, your brain is constantly sending electrical impulses down through your spinal cord, out through all your nerves, to every cell, tissue, and organ in your body. Your body, in turn, then has to send messages back via those nerves, back up the spinal cord, back up to the brain to tell the brain what's going on. So there's this constant communication between the two. And if you've now got problems in the spine, which is now putting pressures on the spinal cord and the nervous system, it's going to stop that brain-body communication. And this is how problems can start to develop. And what we are now starting to understand with really research and science that's come through in the last 5 or 10 years is that when the spine is not moving properly, in particular, it affects this part of the brain, which not only controls focus and concentration, like we've already spoken about, but it also controls hormonal production. So those adolescent teenagers out there, this is going to be really important, okay, to keep the hormonal levels more balanced, keep the spine moving well. When the spine is moving well, this part of the brain works better, and also this part of the brain is key in controlling inflammation. So a child is more likely to experience less inflammation and less pain if the spine is moving well. But if the spine is moving poorly, this part of the brain cannot regulate inflammation properly, and so a child will literally experience more inflammation and so is more likely to experience more pain. This part of the brain also regulates immune system, right? This is huge, obviously, at the moment now. And we can simply improve this part of the brain's ability to regulate immune system if we simply get our spines moving more efficiently. Okay, so another reason why the spine should be checked and cleared of any subluxation problems. And it also controls, this part of the brain also controls the autonomic nervous system, which is all your organs. And I think that alone really is important enough for us to make sure we look after our spines. So always think of your spine like a generator and this part of the brain like a battery. The better the spine moves, the better the battery works, the better all those things are regulated and controlled. And so all we as chiropractors are doing we are trying to assess if there are any subluxations in a person's spine and nervous system, and it includes kids going from newborns. I adjusted both my daughters from the age of 2 hours old, if that, okay? And we adjust people up to in their 90s, okay? So as long as you have a spine and nervous system, we can actually check for subluxations in that spine and nervous system. And it's so gentle on kids. It really is. In babies, it's like feeling for the ripeness of a tomato. It's so gentle. And kids actually normally love their adjustments. Generally speaking, you might suspect that there are subluxation issues there, not only if there are postural issues there, but also even if the child's mood is changing. It means that the nervous system is not balanced. Sometimes you'll notice, obviously, things in the posture as well. Okay, so typically, what kind of stresses can end up causing subluxation problems to develop in a child? Well, we talked about birth stress as one of the biggest ones, but also, just all the bumps and falls that all of us have had through growing up. Whether it be, first learning how to walk, falling downstairs, hitting the table, when we're learning to walk because we're not actually watching where we're going, or, the bicycle accidents that we have, falling off horses, the classic traumas, the car accidents that we may have been involved in as well, even as youngsters. And then obviously as we get older into our sports, and even sleeping position. So check your kid's sleeping position. You'd be amazed at how many problems are occurring in the spine because the child is kind of all twisted and bent and buckled the way they're sleeping, or they've got pillows positioned in strange positions. And they've kind of collapsed and they've flopped like that, and then they're wondering why they've woken up, and the neck is not moving properly. But here's the problem, is in a child, they're not going to normally wake up with a stiff neck. But 2 weeks after they've had that awkward sleepover where they slept funny, they're now getting an ear infection. And this is often how it manifests in children. So, just be careful of, how they're sleeping is a real common one. And obviously the obvious falls and things like off, the monkey bars and the play equipment, etc. All right, so hopefully this is starting to help you understand why, all these traumas and things can eventually leave a lasting impact on our kids' health. And I just want to share with you a story here of, I remember this was actually even back in Ireland. I had a young girl, I'll never forget her name. Her name was Ella. She had red hair, kind of a little bit like me. And she was, she'd actually been booked in to go see the medics to have grommets inserted in her ears because she was constantly getting ear infections. And in fact, she had so many ear infections that they weren't just thinking about putting in grommets, but they were actually also worried that she was getting infection in the mastoid sinus here as well, and they were going to actually open up the mastoid here and try and let it drain. And her mum was really at a sort of wit's end. And I'll never forget when she came into the clinic and she explained to me just, how much her daughter had already gone through in terms of, multiple courses of antibiotics. I mean, it was over 5 or 6 different courses of antibiotics. She'd been booked in to have surgery on a mastoid. In fact, they'd already done it once, but it had failed. So they were trying to do it again. They were also going to be putting in an additional set of grommets as well. And, we checked her spine and her nervous system, and what we find that there were significant subluxations in her upper cervical spine. We started to adjust those, and, it was incredible to actually see that, within a space of really a month, probably to 6 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, she was now not having to take any antibiotics, and she was no longer getting any ear pain or any earaches, and they eventually canceled their operation. And I just looked back. In fact, I was just thinking about it the other day when I was preparing for this talk, and I was thinking, that child's life was forever changed because we actually got to the root cause of why they were getting ear infections in the first place. We don't get recurrent ear infections because their ear just doesn't know what it's doing. It's because there's something that's causing the middle ear to not be able to drain properly. In this case, a subluxation in the upper cervical spine causes so much muscle tension here that the middle ear literally constricts, so it cannot drain properly, so fluid accumulates, so it's a haven for bacteria to reproduce and multiply, and so you end up getting infection after infection after infection. We cleared out the subluxations, the ear could start draining again properly, no more fluid accumulation, no more infections, no more antibiotics. Thankfully saved her from having another surgical operation. And this would have had an impact on her for many, many years onwards, because we know the regular use of antibiotics in kids sets them up for massive problems down the road. Not just immune system problems, but we also now, there's evidence to suggest that those kids who've been on a course of antibiotics, they're much more likely to develop mental disorders down the road as well, because the microbiome is linked also with your brain. And there's now studies showing that it's quite common for children to experience bouts of mental disorder, including depression, normally a few months after they've had a course of antibiotics. So, this is not just, a mild thing when kids are given antibiotics. This has a huge ramifications down the road. So, always look to the root cause of the problem, and that's very much our mantra here at Align for Life. We don't just want to suppress symptoms. We want to get to the root cause. So, quickly recap. Things that you can do immediately, all right? Check your child's posture, all right? Find out if there are any postural distortions there that could be indicating subluxation issues there. Review and implement the backpack guidelines. Make sure you get them to look up regularly when they are having to use a computer. Make sure you follow the nutritional guidelines. Where's the plant? Where's the protein? Where's the fat? Try and implement the best sleep practices. Okay, so remember that golden zone between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. and make sure they're getting adequate amounts of sleep for their respective ages. And then most importantly, think about making seeing if there are any sort of concerns or worries that you have. Seriously consider getting your child's spine and nervous system checked by a chiropractor who can actually detect to see if there are any subluxations there. I wish I'd been checked by a chiropractor earlier when I was younger. I was only first checked when I was 12 years old. It could have saved me a lot of problems growing up. And whilst my parents certainly did a great job with trying to raise me up with eating lots of good healthy things, I know I had a lot of traumas and falls, and I know I paid the price of that, and I developed a debilitating low back problem by the time I was 12. And it got so bad that I'd seen every specialist under the sun, and none of them could help me. I went to the physios, the GPs, one of the leading surgeons at the time, and none of them could help me. I mean, I was a 12-year-old and I could barely run. Life prognosis for me wasn't great. And eventually, out of desperation, my mom eventually took me to a chiropractor. And it so radically changed my life, not just for my back, but I noticed my health started to improve massively afterwards. And it's because of these principles. When you get that nervous system functioning properly, all these other things start to improve as well. Consider getting your child checked for any subluxation issues that you may be concerned about. Obviously, just given the current situation we're in at the moment with coronavirus, if it's not a urgent crisis situation, think about as soon as lockdown ends, get them checked. If it is something that you're really worried and it is a crisis situation, we obviously are available open at the moment for those kind of appointments. And what we've decided to do, like we do with all our online talks as well as our live body signal workshops that we run, we're giving people the opportunity to be able to get these checkups at a discounted rate. So if you are somebody who wants to get a discounted checkup for any problems in your own spine and nervous system or for your kids, just give us a call tomorrow after 11:30 in the morning because we have our team meeting first before that. And what we'll do is if you do phone after 11:30 tomorrow morning, we will grant you a discounted assessment for either yourself or your child. What that normally involves is a detailed history and an examination with one of our chiropractic doctors, either Dr. Newman or myself. We will then, if we feel we need to do any in-depth analyses, we'll do a digital posture analysis. And if we feel it necessary, we might even do an x-ray as well, obviously depending upon the age of the child. For most young children, we wouldn't need to do that. But if there's been significant trauma, that might be a possibility. We would have to obviously review it on a case-by-case basis. We'll then do a detailed report of findings, and that essentially what we'll do is we'll go through and show you their posture and where they should be, and any postural distortions that might be going on there, which could be contributing to any of their health challenges. If we have had to do any x-rays, we'll go through what their x-rays are and compare it to normal healthy, and then you'll be able to see exactly where those subluxation problems are. And then we'll go through a plan of action as to what we feel we might be able to do to help if we feel we can. Normally that all costs £160, but for those of you who are wanting to avail of the offer today, it will be available just for tomorrow. So if you do phone in tomorrow and you want an assessment, it'll only cost £49 for both the assessment and the report. Okay, so hopefully you found it helpful today. If you do have any questions or queries with regards to any of the information we've spoken about, I know I've covered a lot of ground, but please reach out to us. Someone will be able to help you out with that. There's so much more. I mean, I've literally touched the tip of the iceberg. So, tune into our Like our Facebook page. You'll see lots of tips that we're regularly pushing out every week. You'll gain access to also any future talks that we do as well, and you're welcome obviously to pop in as well if you want to. And that being said, I wish you all a very good evening. Thanks for taking time out to be here with us tonight, and I wish you all the very best for you and your family. Take care. Bye for now.